was about to say 1963 for a second there, but it is not. You guys read that Stephen King novel, 11/22/63?
No, I haven't read it.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
I
It's
did.
about
Awesome.
Kennedy's assassination. I haven't got. I'm so back behind in my reading. I haven't read that. I went to the more Lovecraftian one, Revival, first.
Yeah, yeah. And Revival is great. We've talked about that on the show. 11/22/63 is not Lovecraftian, but it's time travel, and you know how I am with time travel. So
It was. I jumped in on the list because it was such an interesting concept. You know, King can take something that simple and go a different direction, and he did. I really enjoyed it.
yeah, and they're making. I guess they're doing a TV series. I forget what channel it's going to be on. I want to say Showtime, but I don't think that's right. But anyway, excuse me, I'm sorry. We're down a couple of people today. Matt had some school stuff with his kids, I believe. Salome's not feeling well, and I believe Pete, and I haven't heard from Joe, but Joe's not been feeling well lately either. Which I have expected too, because we're getting close to Thanksgiving. But Rick and I are here with you guys, and Pete's going to show up in a little while, I believe. So our guests today are Jason Aiken and Frank Schildiner. Am I saying your last name correctly?
You are. You are.
All right, great. And Rick suggested that I invite you guys on the show, and Rick's going to be in charge of the interview today. And then after we're done talking to you guys, we got a couple other interesting things to talk about. I'm going to give this away to a get close to a live viewer today. So as you know, if you watch the show, we give away prizes every show. This is from the awesome ladies at the Littlest Lovecraft. They create these, I guess you could say children's Lovecraftian books, but adults, I think, usually are the ones who are buying them and enjoying them. So anyway, I'm going to give that away, and of course I'll do the secret number for Cthulhu Wars, which I'm doing a giveaway of Cthulhu Wars this month too. So we'll do all that later. Rick, you want to introduce these guys? And I think you're going to start with Jason.
Yeah, well, both Jason and Frank have a couple of things in common. They're both enthusiasts of the Wad Newton universe of Philip Jose Farmer. They're both into Pope literature. They're both into the Cthulhu mythos in different ways. And Jason has started a series which first began in Swords Against Cthulhu about Nunja, a female sword and sorcery character who is tied to the H.P. Lovecraft story Polaris. Her adventures have continued. She first appeared in a story called Thord of Lomar, which was in this collection. She then appeared in a story called The Other at the Threshold in Barbarian Crowns. And there's a related story called The Summoning and an anthology called Fall of Cthulhu. So, Jason, can you discuss this character a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Rick. Nuja of Lomar is very much inspired by the classic Weird Tales pulp writers. Basically, my big inspiration for the character was the swordswomen of C.L. Moore and Robert E. Howard. C.L. Moore has a pulp character, red-haired swordwoman named Jorl of Jory, and she had several stories in Weird Tales with her as the star. The best-known one is probably called Black God's Kiss. And besides Jorl of Jory, Robert E. Howard had two red-headed swordwomen. Dark Agnes, she's the titular swordwoman. And besides Dark Agnes, he had a character called Red Sonja with a Y, and this was Red Sonja of Rogatino. And she was in a piece of historical fiction Howard wrote called The Shadow of the Vulture. And this character of Red Sonja with a Y later morphed into a sword and sorcery hero in the comic books named Red Sonja with a J. And that happened because Roy Thomas ran out of Conan stories to adapt for the Conan comic. So he started using other Robert E. Howard stories and adapting those into Conan stories. So as a result, she became Red Sonja, a sword and sorcery hero in Conan's Hyborian Age. And Nuja of Lomar kind of came out of a Pulp Crazy episode I did, where I highlighted all three of these red-headed sword women. And I just thought that was a cool coincidence that all of these women were red-haired. They all were excellent swordswomen. And when the time came that I saw a couple calls for submissions for Sword and Sorcery meets the Mythos Tales, and I basically said, hey, I like the idea of a red-haired sword woman, and I think the setting of Lomar from H.P. Lovecraft's Polaris has a lot of potential. And basically I decided to kind of combine those two and wrote The Sword of Lomar, which acts as a prequel to Lovecraft's Polaris.
Hey, can I jump in real quick, though, because I think I'm echoing. For the viewers or the listeners who are watching or listening later, who don't know you, who you are at all, Jason, could you say something about yourself? You're talking about your work, but if someone hasn't heard of you, maybe you could just...
Explain what Pulp Crazy is. I should have done that.
Yeah, that'd be a good start.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no problem. My name's Jason Aiken. I write under Jason Scott Aiken as my author name. I've appeared in a few anthologies from Horrified Press, as Rick mentioned. JasonScottAiken.com is my author site. I've been in The Fall of Cthulhu Volume 2, Swords Against Cthulhu, and Barbarian Crowns. I was in another anthology called October's End, which is a Halloween-themed anthology. And I have a story coming up in the next Tales of the Shadowmen 12, Carte Blanche, that should be at end of November, beginning of December. And besides writing, I have a podcast and video cast called Pulp Crazy, which is devoted to classic popular literature, characters, stories, and themes. And a lot of my episodes are about classic weird fiction from Weird Tales and some of the other pulp magazines.
And obviously you're an extremely cool guy because, as I see behind you, you have a Batman figure.
Oh, yeah. I knew you'd like that, Mike.
You did.
And then the Rocketeer as well.
Yep.
Let me put you back on the screen here. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you got some cool stuff behind you there.
Thanks.
Anyway, go ahead, Rick. I just thought it would be a good idea to...
Okay, no, you were right. I was gonna ask about Pulp Crazy in the next question. You anticipated me.
Cool.
You notice some inconsistencies in Lovecraft's stories about Polaris, particularly who destroyed the civilization there, and you reconcile those. Want to discuss that for a moment?
Yes, in Polaris, Lovecraft attributes the destruction of Elothoe to the Inutos. And in some of his other stories, I believe it's the Shadow Out of Time.
Well, it's the Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath and the Mound.
Okay. and he attributes it to the Nofikas, which are a different race than the Inutos. The Inutos are kind of like Neanderthal people that would eventually become Eskimos. And the Nofikas, from Lovecraft's description in Polaris, I kind of almost got the feeling that they were almost ape-like, like they're long-armed and hairy, and I believe he mentions they were cannibalistic.
Yeah, that's how we describe them there. In Horror in the Museum, there's a monster with the same name, and it's not clear if the race is, or the tribe, or whatever it is in Lomar is the same as this monster from Greenland, but they have the same name.
Right. I think, yeah, it's like hyphenated differently at
Yeah.
one point, and yeah, capitalized. But yeah, I wanted to see if I could match up. I think I wanted to see if I could fix that inconsistency in kind of a Philip Jose Farmer, Wold Newtonian type way. And in the Sword of Lomar, I addressed that at the conclusion. I think I came up with a way that makes both statements kind of mesh together.
And how did you were also influenced by Fritz? I always mispronounce this. I think it's Leiber. In one of the supporting characters you have in future ninja stories.
Oh yes, I read. There was a early draft of Adept's Gambit, which was a Fawford and the Grey Mouser story. It was just released in the last couple of years, and it's the one that has mythos elements in it. And I really enjoyed that and Leiber's way of writing. And I also, around that same time, read The Tale of Satampra by Clark Ashton Smith. And I noticed that both of their, well, Clark Ashton Smith's protagonists in The Tale of Satampra, they're thieves. They're not really heroic, larger than life. They're kind of just like normal guys. And Fritz Leiber's characters, Fawford and the Grey Mouser, they're kind of in between. They're not really normal guys, but they're not Robert E. Howard's Conan the Barbarian either. And I wanted to write a story that kind of captured the mood of both Smith and Leiber. And I wrote The Summoning, which features a dark wizard named Nahul, who kind of sends a naive young thief on an errand to steal an artifact from an owl of sorcerers. And that appears in The Fall of Cthulhu Volume 2. And Nahul later pops up in later stories because I made him into Nuja's patron warlock. In the Fawford and the Grey Mouser series, both Fawford and the Grey Mouser, they kind of each have a patron warlock that sends them on missions to acquire certain objects and stuff like that. So I thought that would be a cool way to kind of bring Nahul into Nuja's world, or vice versa.
Yeah, that was Chielba of the Eyeless Face and Ngaba of the Seven Eyes in the original stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to ask you, I'm going to turn to Frank in a moment, but I'm going to ask you one quick question.
Sure.
You got something coming up in Tales of the Shadowmen.
Yes.
Which has a slight Lovecraft reference in it, but just give us an idea of what that story's going to be about. It's more of a
yeah, it's a kind of like a Lost World adventure type story. It stars Doc Arden. He's a character that Jean-Marc Lefisier kind of discovered and revamped. And he's basically like a paragon, like a bronzed paragon kind of akin to who we know as Doc Savage. And he sent, I'm basically, like, the Tales of the Shadow Men is, the whole premise of it is kind of crossing over characters from French literature with other countries, pulp characters in popular literature. And in this one, I have Doc Arden crossing over with the People of the Pole. And the People of the Pole is a book that Black Coat Press put out a couple years ago. And that's about an Arctic expedition that uncovers a race of subterranean iguanodons living at the North Pole. And my story is basically a sequel to The People at the Pole, with Doc Arden heading up there to attempt to rescue the main characters from the People of the Pole.
Okay, and I'm going to turn for a while to Frank.
Can I jump in with a question before you go to Frank?
Okay, sure.
How did you and Jason meet? Whoever wants to take that question.
How did we meet?
Yeah.
Was it at Pulp Fest we met?
Yeah, Pulp Fest PharmaCon.
Which is held every July or August. It's held during the summer in Columbus, Ohio. It's a pulp magazine convention. That's Pulp Fest, but what's happened is PharmaCon, which is the get-together of Philip Jose Pharma fans, dovetails with it. And that's also how I met Frank.
It's true.
Which is a good segue to Frank.
Yeah.
And you've written, we're mainly going to discuss your book, The Quest of Frankenstein, which is a Cthulhu Mythos-related novel that goes much beyond the Cthulhu mythos that Black Coat Press just came out with.
We're all doing it.
But could you just give a little background on yourself, Frank, on the things you've written prior to this?
Okay, thanks, Rick. Frank Schildiner. I am a mixed martial arts instructor in New Jersey. I've known Rick about 15 years online and about, 5 in person now?
Yeah, that sounds about
something like that. I met him through the Wald Newton email site, and Rick used to regularly correct any mistake I had on any subject. It was almost a running game.
Yeah, Dark Shadows was the big one.
Dark Shadows, yes. I know a lot about Dark Shadows. He knows more. And so I wrote an article actually going about the Lovecraftian elements of it, and I sent it to Rick, and of course he sent me back 18 corrections, and he was 100% right, of course. But,
wow, is that article still around?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll send you a copy. It's on.
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great.
It's more of a speculative. I did one for you, which was a straightforward discussion. This is a Philip Jose Farmer type article about. I mean, they did have on Dark Shadows a group of creatures called the Leviathans who were strongly influenced by Lovecraft and the basis for the same creatures and the supernatural. But what Frank did was he went through like every supernatural creature on Dark Shadows and created a theory where you can link it to the mythos.
That's right.
Well, I had a thing for the mythos, so yeah. I've written a lot of pulp over the last few years. I was first published in Tales of the Shadow Men, actually, just like Rick, who was in every year, and Pete was in it. You were in it once or twice, weren't you? Yeah, I knew that. And then I wrote Secret Agent X, which was very much a spy story, and The Black Bat, which was as straightforward as pulp adventure as you're going to get. Then I actually started getting into the mythos. I wrote a character named Ravenwood, stepson of mystery. He's a sort of occult hero by this guy named Frederick Davis. And Davis really didn't like this character. He just wrote it, I think, for the money. It had more of a, I actually call it more of a Scooby-Doo element, where it's like everything turned out to not be a cult at the end. And I said, forget it. I'll do it whatever I like with it. And I did it very, very based in the mythos. So I had a lot of fun with that.
He sort of, I would say, all these characters you're dealing with are public domain pulp heroes that were created.
Yeah, everything I'm mentioning here is a public domain character. I did a bunch of other stories like that. Then I wrote a character named Thunder Jim Wade, another public domain, but he was created by Henry Kuttner, the great Lovecraftian scholar. The thing about that character is that Kuttner really had no interest in adventure fiction, so the character was kind of great setup, bland action, and I made him based in a sort of lost world kind of seeker. He's the guy. His origin is that he was crashed in a lost city in Africa. There seems to be more lost cities than there were Africans at one point in Pulp Fiction. And this one was made out of Minos, the Minosians, Crete, and it's a great setup of that, and then the execution was as bland and as dull as you're going to get. So I said, forget it. If we have this great lost world, let's make him a guy that's out there basically looking for the evils that are lost in the past. So it's all based very much in the mythos. I'm writing another one right now, actually. It's a lot of fun. I think I got one right here. There's that, Thunder Jim Wade.
And
yeah, I had a lot of fun with that.
Was the subtitle of that The Horror from Hyperborea?
Yes, it was. But the Hyperborea was more of Clark Ashton Smith Hyperborea than Robert E. Howard, which Rick, the first thing he said to me when it came out, when I saw him at Pulp Fest, was, your Hyperborea was based in Clark Ashton Smith, right? It's like, yeah, of course you got it. You're the one person who got it first. So it was a lot of fun.
Let me just jump in real quick, because Brett George, for everyone listening live, and I'll post this on the Lovecraft eZine Facebook page later, but he linked to a PDF at philipjosefarmer.com, pjfarmer.com, The Great Old Ones and the Collins Family by you, Frank.
That's
Yeah,
good.
that's Mark Shadow's article.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. With special thanks to Rick Lay. So.
Oh yeah, well, it wouldn't have been nearly close to accurate if it hadn't been for Rick. He made me rewrite it like 2 or 3 times. He's one of the best editors for that kind of stuff.
Yes,
He just knows more than all of us. Which why I always, when I write a fiction, I always throw some of my own stuff in there. And whenever I see Rick, he picks out that one piece and says, "Where did you get this? I never found this, and I looked." It's like the one piece of thing, and it's always
he does the same thing to me.
Yeah, he does it to all of us, but he knows really well. The first one was actually, now that I remember it, it's Ravenwood. Wasn't it Ravenwood?
Yeah.
Or I think it was Ravenwood where I threw something in there like the Secret Masters of Under Detroit.
I think that was the Secret Agent X one.
The fourth one, yeah, you might be right.
Well, it meets Lawrence of Arabia, and it also had a lot of Robert E. Howard stuff in it.
Yes, that was my Howard thing. That was my
Serpent Men of Alucia.
A lot of Acheron.
Yeah, Acheron.
Acheron from the Hour of the Dragon. So, moving on, I wrote a short story for Tales of the Shadowmen using a French version of Frankenstein called Garou. It was created by a man named Jean-Claude Carrière, who is a Academy Award-winning screenwriter. I mean, really heavy thing to be following a guy like that. Also written by Brian Stableford as well. So, it's like following a heck of a lineage. I wrote this story called The Blood of Frankenstein, in which the monster was out looking for something in China, and I pretty much did a tribute to all my favorite kung fu movies of the period, against the 7 Golden Vampires from the Shaw Brothers movie, which I just love that movie. I then asked J.M. Lofsier if I could write a novel based on it, and he said, yeah, I like the idea. And so I did this story where the monster meets up in the 2nd chapter with Herbert West, the American Victor Frankenstein. And I tried to employ more of a concept based in some of Shelley's ideas. Shelley really didn't have any interest in how the monster was created so much as what he became. But she kind of hinted at alchemy and things like that, whereas we're all used to the universal version because electricity at the time was the great mystery of the world. It's not a mystery to us anymore. So I decided to go backwards to the alchemy, and Garul has to go around the world looking for elements to create his mate. And the elements are based in the monster world, so it's kind of a monster rally.
And you bring in a lot of monsters from movies and fiction.
Oh, yeah. I kind of went nuts on that one, yeah.
We'll mention one, since we discussed it earlier, the Blind Dead film series from Spain, which has a Lovecraftian influence. Can you just discuss that series and how you tied it in?
I had the advantage of living in like the New York, New Jersey area right at the end of the period when they still had those small movie houses run probably for drug money or whatever, you know, to hide the money or something. So they would show these unusually fun movies at weird hours. I mean, I used to sneak in like 18. I'd tell my parents I'm going to my friend's house. I'd go into the city to 42nd Street when 42nd Street was not corporate, and they'd be showing like, you know, The Blind Dead and two Shaw Brothers movies in a row. And so I'd take a seat towards the middle of at the front so that all the drug addicts and everything and people falling asleep there all day wouldn't go near me. And I'd watch these movies. And in one of these places, I saw this movie, and I didn't even know the language, about these Templars who are killed and come back as these revenants, and they're called the Blind Dead because the eyes were taken out by crows when they were hung, and they come back as these undead creatures in Spain. And that's when I started learning that Spain has a very rich tradition of horror. And The Blind Dead was really one of the great ones, as well as Paul Naschy created a whole series of movies based in a werewolf, Waldemar Daninsky. I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. And I used a little bit of that in this book as well, because there's such a rich tradition of Spanish horror that most people really don't know about, and I just love it.
And the Blind Dead series, there are different explanations and different groups of Templars that come to life in this series.
Not
one movie is Lovecraftian. That's what I wanted to get into.
Yes, definitely, and that's the reason that's the reason it came to mind for this book, because I wanted to keep an almost Lovecraftian explanation for all magic in this sort of horror world I was creating unconsciously. I just knew in my mind that if there was any kind of magic or unusual, I wanted it to be based in the idea of Lovecraft's Clark Ashton Smith.
The movie is Night of the Seagulls, which was the last movie in the series.
Sorry about that.
There you are. You're back.
Sorry about that.
In other movies, they seem to get their powers from either ancient Egypt or the devil. In this movie, there was an idol of a sea god.
Yes.
Which, to me, looked more like Dagon than Cthulhu. It was unknown.
That's what I thought, honestly, when I saw it, and that's the second one I saw in Manhattan. I saw that and I said, I'm watching Dagon. What the heck is going on here? You know, it was really, you got to understand that back then in these movies, they put the name, and the name was never anything like close to what you were going to see. And you'd sit down at these movies and you'd see that, and you wouldn't even know what language it was in half the time. So I ended up having a lot of fun. And then, you know, a bunch of years later is when the internet starts exploding and you could start finding things out.
Right.
You know, you couldn't really go to the magazines back then because they were more based in the current movies out. And by that time, I'm pretty sure that Famous Monsters of Movieland was gone, and they didn't really cover foreign stuff too well.
Except those weird... I'm sorry, go ahead.
The other problem you had is that there were magazines like Famous Monsters of Filmland and Fangoria and these films, you know, that did cover some of this stuff, but you couldn't just go out to the library and get them.
Not even close. And even with the video revolution, the VHS was out there then. You were at the mercy of what these guys were willing to buy.
Right. Yeah. And that was, and I can remember my dad used to get the big book that came out like every 6 months of all the stuff you could order.
Yes, I got that too.
And you'd flip through it and like, what the hell?
Yeah, you'd find like Japanese movies made in like the 1950s,
Right.
Of ghost stories, and it's like, I want to see this, but it's $69, and I don't know if I'll even like it.
Well, I can remember when the first tapes of like Star Wars and E.T. came out. They were like $800.
I remember that.
I remember them more as like $90.
I maybe you're right.
Guys, though, Frank, those weird theaters you're talking about reminds me. I don't know if any of you read this when you were kids, but Daniel Pinkwater, he used to be an NPR commenter and wrote a lot of really cool children's books, young adult, to be more accurate. And there was a couple called the Snark Out Boys. I think the first one was called the Snark Out Boys and the Avocado of Death, which just kind of gives you an idea of kind of
Yeah, it does.
weird shit it was, So, but the Snark Out Boys, they're a couple of teenagers. Yeah, I don't know how old they were, maybe 15, 16. They would sneak out at night, and I believe they lived in, I don't remember where they lived, but they would sneak out at night and go to this theater that played all these weird movies only in the dead of night, and it was called the Snark Theater. So they coined the phrase snark out, which means to sneak out and go to the snark. And it would play just off-the-wall weird movies like what you're talking about. And when you were talking about that, it made me think of that. So.
Yeah, and you could see back then some really demented things. Like, well, I'll give you the most demented was Cannibal Holocaust, which I saw right after I saw The Kid with the Golden Arms, which is one of my favorite Shaw Brothers movies at the mall. Then this thing comes up, Cannibal Holocaust, and I think I was like backing out of my seat through half of this movie, like, what the hell is going on here? It's like I came here to see Shaw Brothers, and I'm seeing this nonsense. It's like, wow.
Well, they are young adult books, but I've read them once or twice, even as an adult, because I enjoyed them immensely when I was a teenager. And I just looked up the Snark Out Boys and the Avocado of Death, and actually it's free on Kindle Unlimited, and it's only $2.99 to buy. So anybody watching, listening later, check out Snark Out Boys. Pretty cool.
Definitely.
Frank, did you ever see a movie called The Hunchback of the Rue Morgue?
Oh, I certainly did. I certainly did. Yeah, that's that. I never saw that there. That was one of those things that I have. You get the friends who collect and buy everything. They seem to have that endless stream of stuff. And he handed it to me, that one, along with Dracula versus Frankenstein, the really goofy one with the Dracula with the afro. I saw them in the same night.
The reason I'm mentioning that is you won't know it if you hear the English soundtrack, but if you had the Spanish subtitles or read an article on the Spanish version, that's a Cthulhu Mythos movie.
I didn't know that. I saw the dub version.
The plot is this mad scientist is creating this. He's trying to create some primordial life form. Okay. He's trying to create some, and in the Spanish text, and it's completely mispronounced in the English version. It says, "I'm creating something that was mentioned in the Necronomicon."
Oh, really? That was
creature
totally
that came from the, and I suddenly realized he's creating a shoggoth, even though they don't use that term. Because it's a blob-like creature, and it's sort of a Frankenstein version of a mad scientist creating a shoggoth. Is the best way I can describe it.
That's nuts. I love that. I'll have to see now the Spanish subtitled version, because I only saw the English dubbed version 15 years ago, probably.
I only knew about it because it was mentioned in a book called the Necronomicon Files. I forget who the author was, but there was an excellent discussion of the Necronomicon and Evil Dead and so forth.
That's cool. I really like that. That's awesome. So yeah, in Quest of Frankenstein, I have a lot of mythos elements. He fights a deep one at one point. Obviously, Herbert West is in there. There's kind of a meeting throughout the book a couple of times with an avatar of Nyarlathotep. That was a lot of fun to write. It was a fun book to write, and I tried to make it very episodic so that you could come in and kind of enjoy what you're dealing with. Because the character of Garul is more of a force of nature, so you're only going to get this powerful, demonic kind of Frankenstein character. You might as well get more elements from the ones he's going to go and attack. So it was a lot of fun there. It was a good time to write that one. That was my first official novel.
Okay, I want to get Jason back into the discussion now. For both of you, at Pulp Fest, he gave a discussion of Philip Jose Farmer and the Cthulhu mythos as it's sort of utilized in the Wad Newton mythology. And Jason, could you just begin with an explanation of what Wad Newton is and how Farmer tied the mythos to it?
Sure. Yeah, I can definitely give that a go. The Wold Newton family concept of Philip Jose Farmer takes as a basis the real life event that occurred in Wold Newton, England on December 13th, 1795. A meteorite struck outside of the hamlet of Wold Newton, and according to Farmer's theory, there were two coaches of people passing through that area. And in the coaches, the people present, the men and women, they were already of heroic stock. And as a result of, I guess, the ionization of the meteorite, their genes were all enhanced. And basically what happened was some of the women were pregnant, and their families later all intermarried. So it's referred to as the Wool-Newton family due to the interconnectivity of it all. And some of the people that were there, most notable was probably Percy Blakeney. He was the Scarlet Pimpernel. And who else was there? Was an ancestor of Sherlock Holmes there, an ancestor of Tarzan.
Ancestor of Bulldog Drummond was there.
Mm-hmm.
Do I understand this right, though? It's a point to tie in a lot of characters into the same universe.
Correct. Using a historical event.
And, I think about it, if you look at it in Lovecraftian terms, this is sort of a good version of the Color Out of Space, if you really think about it.
Only you would think of that, Rick.
It's like the meteor comes, and instead of having you devolve into some horrible, have you die a slow death, it enhances your genes, and all your descendants are brilliant and super strong humans.
Wold Newton is how you and I met, too, right?
Right. That was the first time you had me on. We were discussing that.
Yeah, someone suggested we talk about it, and that you were the expert on this. That was it from there.
Yeah. Now I do have a story. I think it's Professor Peasley Plays Paris, in which the great race of Yith have agents around the world making sure that never happens again. They can't afford to have superhumans running around the planet.
And just what we understand by superhumans, we don't mean like sort of mutants or inhumans in the Marvel comic sense or metahumans in the DC. They're just guys who are, it's sort of an explanation for how James Bond survives all this stuff, is the best way I can think about it. Guys who are great swimmers, great skiers, great pilots, masters of all trades. seems to survive things, heal very fast, apparently. Because, you know, I once went through, I think it was the Shadow. He got, like, shot in the shoulder about 200 times or something. And,
Yeah.
you know, he can still use his arm, which should be gone by now.
And, you know, who is it? Charlie Chan.
Yeah.
Yeah. Easily is doing detective work into his hundreds. If you put all the books and movies together.
Well, not to mention Sherlock Holmes suddenly jumping from the Victorian age to the late 1930s, early 1940s.
Well, that's if you count the Universal movies.
I know.
Well, speaking of that, because we have a little segue into Frank, want to mention the Creeper?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I love the Creeper. The Creeper was in The Pearl of Death, Sherlock Holmes, 1930s. It's one of the better ones. Played by the great Rondo Hatton. And the character in the story, the Brute Man, and one other, Rick. I can't remember the name off the top of my head.
House of Horrors, I think.
Yes, it was, because that's where he actually had dialogue. He's this inhumanly strong, almost impossible to kill giant of a man who shatters your spine when he attacks you. And I had him meet up with Garul, who is inhumanly strong, hard to kill, and unlike he doesn't shatter spines, he has razor sharp teeth and he bites you. So I had them a kind of clash of the titans right in the middle of World War One. That was really a pleasure when you're opening your book with a fight between Rondo Hatton and the Frankenstein monster. You know you're having fun.
You know, Rondo Hatton was unfortunately a tragic actor who suffered from acromegaly, I think is what you call it.
Yeah, I believe it's what it's pronounced. Yeah.
I mean, his face got wildly
Mutated.
and large.
Yeah, the limbs are and the bones are incredibly enhanced in size, and it's supposedly very painful. And apparently, before he contracted it, he was a very good-looking guy, but he got it. There's a lot of stories. Some people say he got it because he was in World War I and got mustard gas, but that doesn't make any real genetic sense. But he parlayed this gigantic, grotesque features that he had into a small career as an actor, and it was a lot of fun to see him in these parts because he was so gigantic and scary looking. He was a natural character that way. I loved him.
Want to talk about the Rocketeer connection?
Yeah, of course he remembers it. They played tribute to him in the Rocketeer book, comic book, and the movie. Can't remember the name of the character.
Lothar.
Oh, there you go. I knew he'd know. Lothar, and they made the real Rondo Hatton was not a giant in terms of height. He was in terms of his shoulder spread, which they enhanced, and his hands and his face. They made Lothar into like 7'6", 8 feet tall kind of guy, incapable of being hurt for the stories they used him in mostly. It was a great tribute. Plus, there's the Rondo Awards for horror, so his face lives on kind of forever in the statues. Really awesome tribute to the man.
And just one last thing before we leave this character. If you watch Sherlock, the last episode of the first season, the one where they reveal Moriarty.
Yeah, the Golem.
They had it. I guess it was called the Golem. I couldn't remember. They had an assassin who was essentially the Creeper.
Yeah, and
based on the Creeper.
The actor playing was a European actor who was over 7 feet tall in real life.
And I think they had something about him breaking people's backs or something.
Yes, they did. They did. I was fascinated by that because it was actually a very realistic view of a person trying to fight somebody 7 feet tall with strong limbs and all of that. I'm a great fighter. I'm a black belt, second-degree black belt. I fought as a sparring partner to pros. I'm not a weak-willed kind of guy that way. But I look at somebody like 7 feet tall, I'm going to have to say, I'm going to take a second choice on this one. So
yeah, and the whole back-breaking thing, that's just, the fight's over, you know?
Oh, yeah, no. If you can physically do something like that in real life, I mean, you know, breaking legs, breaking arms, that kind of stuff is just technique. It's, you know, that can be done. I've broken baseball bats and things like that the same way. But you can do a spine with your hands. That's something a little beyond me and most people I know. I mean, that guy from Game of Thrones, the Mountain man, is 6'9", 400 pounds of solid muscle. You know, I got a second thought on this guy. You know.
Yeah.
No, I still have not seen that show.
I haven't seen it either.
Neither have I.
Yeah.
I've never seen the show, but I've seen him, and
Yeah.
he had a video recently where they showed him having a fun kind of sparring session with a champion UFC guy who is 5'9" and about 150 some odd pounds, and a really tough, strong guy. And he looked like a little person from the circus compared to this guy. This man is so enormous. He lifted. He broke a 1,000-year record of carrying 1,300 some odd pounds for 5 steps.
Wow.
Yeah, what can you do to somebody like that? You know?
Back away.
Yeah, maybe Batman, but not me.
Yeah.
Now, to get back to the Wad Newton universe, Jason, some Lovecraftian characters were brought into the Wad Newton family in Doc Savage's Apocalyptic Life, Farmer's biography of Doc Savage. You want to discuss them a little bit?
No.
Well, the only one that I'm really aware of, maybe you guys could speak more to it, but Professor William Dyer from At the Mountains of Madness, I believe Farmer postulated that that was really, was that Johnny, Little
Yeah.
John?
Yeah, he had a theory that it was Johnny,
Yeah.
who in Doc Savage is this lanky archaeologist who talks with big words and has, in a sense, a vocabulary as wide as Lovecraft's. But I don't buy that theory.
I don't buy the other one either.
The Robert Blake one?
No, the
What's
the idea that Doc Savage was McCready.
I knew you were going to.
All right. Well, that wasn't Farmer. That was a guy named Al Tonic.
Okay, good.
And I did advance that in my Doc Savage biography. But what seems to have happened was Who Goes There we're talking about, which is the basis for the thing. What seems to be going on there was that John Campbell even was influenced by Doc Savage when he created McCready. He's a man of bronze. So there's a Doc Savage influence. Whether you want to make them the same person, like I helped postulate, and even though Al Tonic was the original conceiver of this notion, is another thing. But that's just speculation.
He feels strongly about this.
Yeah. But
Well,
do Frank or Jason, do you remember the Robert Blake angle?
Oh, yes, that he's the stand-in for Robert Bloch.
Was a good friend of Philip Jose Farmer's.
That part I knew. I didn't know there was a bigger one. I thought there was a bigger one.
But he's a member of because it's like there's a whole branch of the Wad Newton family which are great fictional writers.
Yes.
So I'm trying to think. The guy from Raintree County is one, and I can't think of his name. Kilgore Trout from Kurt Vonnegut is, and on that branch is Robert Blake from Horror of the Dark. But he gives him the exact same birthday as Robert Bloch, which means that when the Horror of the Dark took place, he was something like 18 or 7, whatever block was when he wrote that story. Or when Lovecraft wrote that story, he sets it in this particular date in 1935. And Blake would have to be a teenager like Block for that to be true.
I've got some audience questions, if that's all right.
That's fine.
First question comes from Kimberly. Question for, well, she says either, let's say both guests. If you could do a crossover with any character, regardless of copyright, who would it be and why? Whoever wants to tackle that first.
That's a tough one because I cross over pretty much with everybody. When I wrote Quest of Frankenstein, I really didn't hold back on who I wanted to cross over.
Yeah, but let's say somebody that's copyrighted that you can't write about, but
if you could get an authorization,
yeah,
like Will Murray does, to do an authorized crossover.
Authorized crossover. The Duke de Richelieu from Dennis Wheatley's many books, especially The Devil Rides Out, would probably be my first choice. I absolutely adore the Dennis Wheatley occult stories, so I probably would go there first. That would be the one I'd cross over, see if I could do something with him, especially in his earlier days when you didn't find out why he was so good at the occult. You only found out some of that over the course of time.
That series is not Lovecraftian, but it's William Hope Hodgsonian.
Yes, it's not Lovecraftian in any way, but it is definitely got a. They go two ways. They're either adventure stories or they're occult-based stories, like The Devil Rides Out, The Satanists, and things like that. And the character, the Duke de Richelieu, was best played by, of course, the great Christopher Lee in The Devil Rides Out or The Devil's Bride, depending on which country version you have. Really great stuff, and I would love to have some fun with that one day, but I can't.
It's heavily influenced by Carnegie the Ghost.
Definitely.
He uses some of the same terms, like I think there's something called Monstrosities of the Outer Realm.
Yes.
Toxin.
And Dwellers in the Darkness, Threshold, use of creatures from the Threshold, things like that. There's a big influence there. I don't even know if Wheatley was aware of Lovecraft.
No, Wheatley was, because he uses the Samson ritual.
Oh, that's right. You're right.
Which is from Hoxton. There's something. It's spelled with this weird name, and Hoxton. I think it has too many S's.
Yes,
so we just chopped off an S, but it's the same ritual.
You're right. You're 100% right. Well, see, people, he always corrects me, and I'm cool with it. But that's been us for 15 years.
And Ramsey Campbell brought that in to the Cthulhu mythos.
Yeah, I believe.
Stone on the Island, I think, is the story.
You were the one who pointed that out to me, I think.
Yeah. What about you, Jason?
I'd like to do a crossover 2 movie characters. That would be Richard B. Riddick from the Chronicles of Riddick series and Predator.
Oh, yeah.
From the Predator film franchise. I think that would be pretty cool.
They do a lot of Predator. Well, I mean, it hasn't. I don't think it's been done recently because I haven't been in the comic book store. But there was this period where everybody imaginable was fighting Predator in the comics.
Or the Alien.
Yeah, I mean, even though Alien became the most famous one and became movies.
Tarzan versus Predator.
Yeah, Tarzan versus Predator was the one.
Batman.
Yeah, twice.
Yeah.
Twice, yes. And one video.
Yeah.
That's right, and it was actually pretty good. Fan-made video.
I liked it.
Yeah, and this was before the Christian Bale Batman movies.
Can't argue with that.
Yeah. Jason Luke says, I've only read the Howard Conan stories. What is the difference between the Howard and the Smith versions of Hyperborea? Whoever wants to tackle that one.
Oh, you better have Rick do that one.
Okay. Hyperborea is a lost continent in Clark Ashton Smith. That's totally separate from any landmass, and it's up near the North Pole. And Lovecraft said it was somewhere near Lomar, and at the Mountains of Madness and other stories. And Hyperborea in Robert E. Howard is part of that huge Hyborian landmass that's sort of Europe, Africa, and Asia. It's the northern corner. And even though both Howard and Smith reference each other in their stories, they've never explained what the relationship is between the two Hyperboreas. I always like to think that when that continent got wiped out by glaciers in Ashton Smith, a group of sorcerers moved over to the northernmost corner of the Hyborian landmass and settled that place and named it Hyperborea. It's sort of a new Hyperborea.
Cool.
I think Lynn Carter had Hyperborea coexisting with King Cole's world. And that would be the predecessor to the Hyborian Age of Conan.
I believe also Carter had him did a little version of it. It might have been somebody else who basing him on Finnish mythos as well.
Yeah.
I think Lynn Carter was the one who did that one.
The story I was thinking of was in it's one of the Eibon stories.
Yeah.
Where Eibon is studying under a wizard.
Mm-hmm.
And they try to research the serpent men of Valusia.
Ralph. Rick, you know Ralph. Am I saying his last name right? Grasso.
Yes, Ralph Grasso.
Says, ask Frank if he will incorporate Shang-Chi in any stories.
If I could, I 100% would. I mean, I love.
What the hell is Shang-Chi? First.
That's from Marvel Comics.
Marvel Comics. He is
that's why I don't know. Yeah.
Fu Manchu.
Yeah, he's the son of Fu Manchu.
But now he's the son of the Mandarin.
Right, because they don't own the rights, and it's ridiculous.
No, but I think they did that because they know they goofed up in Iron Man 3 was how they handled the Mandarin.
Well, yeah.
And they even made a short film where they kind of corrected that goof that there's a real Mandarin out there.
Right.
So the only way you can do the Mandarin is if you get rid of the racial element by making the good guy Asian as well. So
right.
My prediction is I don't know whether it's going to be a TV series, a movie, whatever. You're going to see Master of Kung Fu in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
And those of you who don't know, Shang-Chi is the son of either Fu Manchu or the Mandarin, and he started training in Kung Fu at age 18 months. And by the time probably, yeah, exactly, I trained kids at age. Okay. From that good. He gets involved in fighting his father, like in his 20s, in like the early 1970s, and it's based in a very the series Master of Kung Fu is based in a very James Bond type universe. It's the son of James Bond, grand nephew, I think, of Sherlock Holmes as a character, and there's a lot of references to characters like that. It's a very well-written, fun series. There's even some really funny elements in it that are thrown in, like there's a character based on Groucho Marx, and another one based on W.C. Fields, who appear in that. And one of my favorite little stories about that was there was a character in the story called Reuben or Rufus Super Midnight Carter. Yeah, you love that. I love that name alone. It fits the 70s blaxploitation style. The reason he was known as Super Midnight was, I think it was Doug Moich, was that he couldn't come up with a character based on a name of like an ordinary object. And it was Super Midnight copy paper, or or stencil paper or something like that. And he came up with the name of the CIA agent, African-American CIA agent who's American kickboxing champion as well. I thought that was just a funny little throw in there that they had some fun with. So yeah, if I could write Shang-Chi, I'd drop everything and do it in a heartbeat, but Well, that ain't happening.
Now the original Fu Manchu stories, by the way, are being reprinted. There's a hardcover going to come out in whatever Marvel, when they reprint their comics, whatever that series is.
Yeah, it's about $150 per hardcover, I believe, from what I read.
Oh.
Exactly what I said. It's like, oh God, I'm waiting for this for half my life, and now they're going to make me 150. I can't afford that.
No, yeah, I agree with you on that. So I only go crazy on Cthulhu Wars figures.
I think I got all the audience questions. Rick, you got any more questions?
Do we want to discuss Philip Jose Farmer's The Freshman, Jason?
No. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. The Freshman, it's a short story written by Philip Jose Farmer, and it takes place at Miskatonic University. And it's pretty widely reprinted. You can find it in several Cthulhu Mythos anthologies. But most recently it was reprinted in Tales of the Wool Newton Universe from Titan Books. And that's got a lot of really cool Wool Newton fiction in there. If anyone's interested in Wool Newton, I highly recommend that collection.
The title again?
Tales of the Wool Newton Universe.
Okay.
And basically, The Freshman, it's about I think basically the first day of registration and the events that unfold during this one guy's first day at Miskatonic University. But it's a little different because he's not your traditional freshman. I believe he's 65 years old. Yeah. And he takes you through his day, and it revolves around a fraternity that's recruiting him. And there's some cool Cthulhu Mythos references in there, and overall it's just a really entertaining and fun story.
It's sort of a different version of Miskatonic University, because generally the way people have gone with Miskatonic University, it becomes this almost anti-Cthulhu organization, where Brian Lumley took this to the extreme, where the professors are in the 70s and 80s are trying to prevent the rise of Cthulhu, and Phil Farmer has it more like the sorcerers have taken over the university.
Yeah,
wait.
Funny stories about that here. When you read, there's little references here and there, like the kid in line behind the main characters reading Robert Blake, and the different names of the fraternities are very based in like the Order of the Day of Dagon and things like that. And
House of Hastur.
Yeah, House of Hastur. And there's really funny asides that are very close to what you would hear, like you don't want to go near them, they're into this stuff, that you would hear for a normal fraternity. So it was a very clever, tongue-in-cheek view of fraternity life and the mythos in one shot.
Yeah, Brett J. Talley's two books are what you're talking about, Rick, the reverse.
Also, what started was really Fritz Leiber wrote it's almost a parody. I really don't consider it a straightforward story, but it's fun to read.
To Arkham and the Stars.
Arkham and the Stars is what it was called.
Mm.
And then Brian Lumley created the Wilmouth Foundation, which was run out of Miskatonic University and the boroughs beneath.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, Pete, is your version of the mythos consistent with Lumley's Wilmouth Foundation? Because you're using he had it run by the Peasley family.
Yeah, no, it's not.
All right, so you're going to take the Peasleys in a different direction.
I am. I am. They have their own problems.
Well, that's fine because it's just Ramsey Campbell said it best. The mythos is too large for everything to make perfect sense.
Well, the big problem is that if you accept Lumley's chain of events, Miskatonic University ends up being destroyed.
Right. Strangely, Willem and I think in that Rebecca Pascal novel has a reference to.
Oh yeah, the last Revenant of Rebecca Pascal.
Yeah.
Good book.
I think he had a reference to Miskatonic University being destroyed, or at least.
I really enjoyed that book. Lots of atmosphere. Willem, W.H. Pugmire and David Barker, for anyone who hasn't read it. The last Revenant of Rebecca Pascal.
And
Something like that.
I think what happens in the mythos today is that writers are cafeteria crossovering. In that you may make reference to Lumley's gods, but you don't accept everything that happened in Lumley.
Right.
And at some point, because I've had this debate in the Wad Newton universe, we have a group, I would say that Frank Jason and I, all the varying degrees, Wad Newton writers, Pete as well. We borrow what we like, but like if Pete made a reference to something in one of my stories from the Wad Newton universe, that doesn't mean he accepts everything else that I've claimed.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Right. It's hard because, and this is where when I was doing Legacy of the Reanimator, Frank warned me that this would not fit in with the rest of the timeline, and I don't have a problem with anything that happens in here. It fits in with Herbert West's timeline just fine.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. But there are other people who have just taken. There's a woman who they're actually really good novels. I think there's 4 of them. They're Herbert West romances.
And you said they're good. Okay.
And they're good. They're really good, but they completely they pretty much rewrite the story from day one as almost a strict romance.
Yeah. And not a gay romance, I gather.
There is, I believe that happens in the later books.
Yeah.
Well, your books are really kind of romances too, aren't they?
Oh yeah.
Well, I was just going to say what happened was fiction. We had a lot of male bonding going on, and there are a couple of writers who would, with Holmes and Watson and whatever, and this had nothing to do with gay relationships. But there were a couple, like I've heard some speculation about the Raffles series by.
Exactly what I was going to think on.
That one I do, even though they both are heterosexuals and have girlfriends and whatever. There are some elements of that at least an argument can be made that the writer had some gay tendencies.
Right. Philo Vance.
Yeah.
Was not openly gay, but it was clear in the books that he was.
I never thought of that, but
Yeah.
but I can see where you got that from.
No, actually, I think it's will you be wearing the green carnation tonight?
Yeah.
Which was a symbol at the time. Which is funny because they cut that out basically from when they made the films. Starring, who was it? William Powell, who was also
William Powell originally. There were
Yeah.
later actors who. Edmund Lowe took over the role.
Right.
Because I only know that because the movie that I love to watch of that series is the Gracie Allen murder case.
I'm just going to go down a path here, and Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, but as an aside on this issue, in the Maltese Falcon,
Yes.
the assistant to the main villain is
Wilmer.
yes,
The gun cell.
is called a gunzel.
Yes.
And that is at the time that was a derogatory term, and it was used to describe a young man who was servicing an older, wealthier gentleman.
Right.
And
A gunzel?
a gunzel.
Gunzel. But it was a kept Game Boy.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. Okay.
But it was late, since that movie, that term has become completely different.
Now people think it means gunman.
Yeah.
And what sometimes happens is what's a little weird is I'll read, and you have this problem when because all of us write period fiction at some point. I've seen the term gunso used before in a story that's set before that book came out, and they're using it to mean gunman.
Kim just wrote, "Wow, the things that I learn on this show." Yeah, me too.
Well, that was Hammett getting by the censors.
Right.
Because with the story, there was an excellent article of this written by Frederick Danae, who was half of Ellery Queen. Manfred Lee was the other guy. They were two cousins who wrote the Ellery Queen books. And in the original manuscript, somebody makes reference to the Gooseberry Lay. And when the editor, Cap Shaw, or whoever it was on Black Mass back then, saw that, it says, or this is a gay reference, I'm tearing this out. And Hammett put that in as deliberately as something to be edited out. So he says, he'll look at that. He's not going to look up gunso now.
Right.
He's going to assume I'm using some term for gunmen I learned in the Pinkertons when I was with them. So Hammett used to throw in things that seemed like gay references but weren't to get the gay reference by.
Yeah. So how did we get on this? Is this my fault?
It's
No,
probably.
we were talking about her, like in Mythos. Molly Tanzer wrote that Herbert Weston Love.
Right. Right.
We had all these all these protagonists, whether they be detectives, mad scientists, spies, who have a male assistant who narrates their adventures. And that has been sort of reinterpreted. Many of those relationships reinterpreted to be gay in later adaptations. And it was just that you couldn't have men and women living together in the Victorian age. So you didn't have men with female assistants for the most part.
And that's a fine story too. Proud to say I'm the first one who published that. Herbert Weston Love. You can read it for free at Lovecraft eZine. So I don't remember what issue it's in, but if you go to the site, scroll down bottom right, you can just search. Hit the search box for Herbert Weston Love.
I've been happy to republish that story.
Oh, that's right. Where did you republish that again?
It'll be in Legacy of the Reanimator, which,
Oh, yes.
in theory, comes out December 1st or 2nd.
Though in practice, some of us bought copies of Necronomicon or got contributor copies there.
How is that theory coming along?
I haven't seen any movement on Amazon, but I'm bugging them every day.
Well, I just want to make one of the members of the Lovecraft Circle was Donald Wandre.
Yep.
And besides all the horror fiction he wrote a very good detective series called Ivy Frost, which is supposedly going to be reprinted sometime this year, but it's been on pre-order forever. He was one of the first writers to have a man and woman detective team. And what's interesting about Ivy Frost series, it's sort of a forerunner of the British TV series The Avengers, in that it's got a very cerebral male character, and the muscle is a woman.
So,
who's gorgeous, sort of a gorgeous forerunner of the Emma Peel type character. But that's Donald Wandre who started that trend, as far as I can tell in literature.
Rick, I can't believe you brought that up, because I'm currently listing stuff for sale on Amazon. You know, make the holidays a little better around here. And I'm listing the Fettigam and Bremer Frost by Donald Wandre.
Yeah, they only published half the stories. There's going to be a complete collection coming out soon of all of them.
This copy that I'm just going to plug it because, you know, it's my time. It was a gift.
And post it on the message board when you get all this stuff all ready to go, because I'm sure plenty of people who watch most of the show will be wanting to buy books from you.
Yeah.
So.
The copy I'm posting was a gift, and it's signed by both editors to Hubie Cave.
Oh.
Nice.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Well, that should fetch a buck or two.
Well, maybe. I don't know.
He was a very nice. I met him at Pulp Fest UBK.
Yeah.
He
lived not far from me.
Well, I mean, he's now deceased.
Yeah. And unfortunately, what happened is a lot of his books ended up at the library sale.
Yeah.
That's hard.
But he was a great guy to talk to.
Yep.
Even though he got shafted by Lovecraft. Lovecraft viewed him as a hack, and UB Cave tried to start up a correspondence that didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
He wrote a few stories with mythos references, but when he, in the pulp era, Cave wrote a few stories with mythos references. Later in this, I think around the 70s or 80s, he started to write mythos stories as well. The later ones, he wrote true mythos stories. The early ones have mythos references, but he doesn't get the mythos.
Right.
Was Wandry, was he the guy, I don't want to phrase this because I can't even think of the name of the short story right now. Man with the black man with a horn? Man with a black horn?
No, he wrote something called The Lady in Gray.
Okay.
That was in a collection about which had nightmares in the title. And I think you read it in an anthology that had nightmares or something. And I think you brought up Lady in Gray before. His mythos stories are Lady in Gray, which is about a guy who has this dream about a woman and a giant worm. Tree Men of something, I think the title is something like Tree Men of Mwana, which has an alien called the Great Old One, who's creating tree men in Africa. And he wrote another one called The Fire Vampires, which just had was a science fiction story in which there was a fire entity with a Lovecraftian name. And Lynn Carter made that part of the Cthulhu mythos.
Cthulhu, I believe it was in that one.
Fathagua.
Was Fathagua, and Lynn Carter made Fathagua a minion of Cthulhu from August Derlitz's The Dweller in Darkness.
What does that be?
That is The Web of Easter Island.
Oh yes, I forgot The Web of Easter Island.
Which was re-released under its original title, what is it, Titan's Wake?
Yeah, well, an earlier draft was, I think it was Centipede put that out.
Dead Titan's Wake.
Yeah. Yeah, when Titan's Wake, this is sort of like the Fritz Leiber Adept's Gamble, in that the original version of the story has more blatant Lovecraftian versions than the one that was finally published.
Right.
There is a reference in that novel to some entity who's, it's not Cthulhu, but it's close enough. It's a variant of Cthulhu. It begins with an S instead of a C or whatever. In fact, it was so clever a variant, I didn't catch that he meant Cthulhu until somebody pointed it out.
Yeah.
Oh. So, Frank's book, again, is, what was that title again? I'm sorry.
The Quest of Frankenstein.
The Quest of
And
Frankenstein.
don't forget his older one.
First Seed and Other Stories, and Other Tales.
Other Tales.
Which does have some of those stories in there.
I have linked to the Frankenstein book on today's post to Lovecraft eZine, and also. Whoa, Frank. There we go. Frank just went crazy there. Anyway, I linked to it.
I had to switch entities.
Jason's website is pulpcrazy.com, right?
Yeah, and jasonscottaiken.com as well.
Okay.
That's my author page.
Okay. Looks like there's two of you on the screen there, Frank. The other one probably. Did you turn the other one off? It'll probably fade off. Otherwise, it'll echo quite a bit, probably. Okay, Rick, any more questions for these guys?
No, I think we've covered it, but maybe we want to get them in a discussion that you and I were discussing earlier.
Yeah, absolutely.
Has anybody seen the latest episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.?
Nope. Are you guys watching that this season, or do you watch it at all?
I haven't seen any of this season's episodes yet, no.
Okay, well, we're going to try and keep this spoiler-free, okay? As much as possible, but I would like to say that if you're a Lovecraft fan, and let's assume you are if you're watching or listening to this show, this latest episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. will make you very happy, I think. What do you want to say about it, Rick?
I'm gonna be vague too, but it looked like they were describing some character who they're tying into the Inhumans. But when they were describing him, I said, are they saying Cthulhu is an Inhuman? Because they didn't name him, but he's got some Cthulhu-like attributes. And I know there are various theories of who this person is on the internet. And all the theories I've read are being, in my opinion, misled by the fact that they describe this character as an Inhuman. I think he's a character who was very Lovecraftian in the comic books. I'm not going to say who he is, but he appeared in the Avengers initially. Actually, he appeared in Marvel Chillers. That's the clue. First appearance in Marvel Chillers, second appearance in the Avengers. And I think you're going to recognize him from something else when he appears eventually on the series.
And not only this, but they're sacrificing people to this entity.
Yes.
There's portals.
Is it Magora?
No.
No, it's not going to be. I don't think it's Shimagora.
Okay.
There's words thrown around, phrases thrown around like people were consumed with dread. They banished it from the earth, sent through a portal. I'll stop there, okay? But if you're a fan of Lovecraftian themes, cosmic horror, weird fiction, all this stuff, and you're a geek, and, you're all those things because you're under the sound of my voice right now. I think you would like it, don't you agree, Rick? It's pretty cool. It really took me by surprise. Here I'm watching it.
I was looking at describing Cthulhu, and particularly they do a visual thing, which is the real spoiler, which I can't mention.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I got it.
I'm just going to give you, if you know what happens in the show, it kind of made sense if you read Shadow over Innsmouth in a strange way.
Gotcha.
Because the name of something on S.H.I.E.L.D. pops up in that story.
Well, we wanted to say just enough, Rick and I talked about this before, to get anyone who's not watching Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and they're not paying me, interested, because it's pretty cool. Now, like I said, I'm just watching a superhero type show that I'm interested in. All of a sudden, these Lovecraftian things start happening, and it's just like awesome. And
just if you're a fan only of the movies, I think the mid-season final, the way they're going with the series, is gonna hook heavily into the films.
Yeah, when does that next movie come out? Isn't it like Iron Man versus Captain America or something like that.
Yeah, well, that's Civil War, but I'm
Oh.
thinking. I'm not thinking they're setting up Civil War. I think it was this Lovecraftian angle. They're explaining something that had been mystifying me in the movies.
Okay.
I was trying to figure out how something fit in. And now I'm saying this explains that angle that I couldn't understand where they were going with.
So check out Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Okay, so other news. A few months back, there's a new a small studio film called The Last Case of August T. Harrison. It's kind of a Lovecraftian noir film, and the director allowed me to show it one Saturday night, as I will very once in a while do. I'll show movies that aren't available anywhere else, Lovecraftian movies. And it was pretty good. And I'll just read the reason why I bring it up now is because it's now available. I guess it's on Vimeo on demand. I don't know what that means. I didn't see it available on Amazon, but I'm assuming Vimeo on demand is something that you can pay for and watch the movie, like rent it digitally or something.
It stars it's Jerry Lacey is the star.
Yeah.
Frank, tell us what Jerry Lacey is.
Jerry.
Oh, you just muted, Frank.
Just muted.
Well, let me read the synopsis to the movie while Frank's figuring that out. That's better. August T. Harrison, Private Eye, comes out of retirement to solve a bizarre missing persons case, but finds himself caught in the middle of a dark conspiracy involving the writings of H.P. Lovecraft. Yeah, Jerry Lacey. Anyway, go on.
Now, talk about Jerry Lacey, Frank.
Jerry Lacey was a character in Dark Shadows who first appeared in the 1700s. He played a character named Reverend Trask. And every time they went through time, there was another Trask family member played by Jerry Lacey. The Trask family are crazy. It's just simple enough. They're out of their mind opportunists who try to burn witches and very, very nasty characters. And the funny thing is, thanks to Big Finish Productions, he's actually still playing Reverend Trask on audio plays.
Versions of them. It was actually a lawyer named Tony Peterson first.
Yeah, he was Tony Peterson, but Tony Peterson was implied later as a retcon to be a Trask.
Yeah, but what was interesting, Jerry Lacey's story plays the Private Eye, and he is a great actor. And when I was watching Dark Shadows, he first popped up as in this really minor role of Tony Peterson as a lawyer. And then they go back in time, and all the actors from the present day Dark Shadows were playing people in the past. He had such a different manner and voice as Reverend Trask. He doesn't use his natural voice. His voice, he uses his regular voice in this film.
He has this nasty, messianic kind of edge to him when he plays Reverend Trask. When he plays Tony Peterson, which he also played through Big Finish again, he's got this very even, calm way of speaking, very normal actor. But as Reverend Trask, there's this crazed edge about everything he says. Even if he's saying, I have to go across the room to pick something up, it's an act. It's crazed.
Right. But I didn't believe that was the same person when they finally brought him back after they got back. I'm going, oh my God, Reverend Trask was Peterson?
Yeah, it's
so different.
So different. The latest version of Reverend Trask was done earlier this year. Dark Shadows had another series, a full cast series. And this version of Reverend Trask was the town drunk, but he still spoke with that same crazed edge, even if he was, when he was accusing somebody of cheating in cards.
Yeah.
It was very funny, crazed way of speaking.
Well, he did a wonderful job in The Last Case of August T. Harrison. Were you here that night, Rick?
Yes.
Yeah, and I believe he was watching after I showed the movie when we were talking to the director.
Right.
Watching us discuss it. So that was kind of neat.
The other thing about Jerry Lacey, and one of the reasons he's playing a private eye, is he was in Play It Again, Sam, both the Broadway play and the movie. He played Bogart's ghost.
Mm.
He can do a superb Bogart impersonation. And in the current Dark Shadows audio dramas, well, they sort of ended this arc, but they did about, I think, 4 or 5 episodes, where Tony Peterson, who was a lawyer in the TV show, becomes a private eye and teams up with the witch who was persecuting him in the original show, Lara Parker's Angelique, who was known as Cassandra Collins. And those are fun occult mysteries.
Yeah,
Well, I
and
like
some
the
of them
movie.
actually have a Lovecraft element.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, Stephen Mark Rainey has written some audio dramas,
yes.
and
Yeah.
he inserted Lovecraftian elements, particularly in Curse of the Pharaohs, where we have an actual Lovecraftian name, even though it's pronounced in the way I would never pronounce it. Nephren Ka became Nepherim Ka, but it's the Lovecraft's Egyptian pharaohs also that.
Well, Brett George just posted it on the message board. Says it's a $4.99 rental at Vimeo, and he's got the, I guess it's probably the trailer or whatnot. So anyway, check it out. It's pretty cool. I think we're echoing into yours, Jason.
You
Yeah.
listen to it, Jason?
Yeah, can you hit the mute button unless you want to talk, and then you can just unmute it? Well, that's better. It's not echoing now. Many pleasures of Google Hangout. Moody sometimes, but that's all right. Okay, so I wanted to mention the last case of August T. Harrison. What else do we have to talk about? Pete, Rick, anybody? Any more news?
Does that Cthulhu Wars raised over $1 million in their Kickstarter?
Yeah.
And they're going to have everything imaginable almost in this new version of the game.
Well, Ramsey Campbell is something of Ramsey Campbell's in it. Actually, I don't know what it is.
They're going to have Ramsey Campbell figures of his monsters and great old ones. They're going to have a new faction, which is the Chow Chow people from August Derlitz, and they're going to be worshiping Clark Ashton Smith's Ubal Sattler, who is the creator of all life on Earth. Sort of a super Shoggoth, in a way, even though it was created independently in the Shoggoth. And there have been various attempts by mythos writers to merge the two somehow. And you're getting all, I mean, I contributed it to get, since everything went out of print, I was not going to, or went out of stock, I was not going to lose out this time. So I went to get a lot. And you get all the stretch goals, so it looks like I'm going to get free glow-in-the-dark figures whenever this comes out in a year or so from now.
Well, since you mentioned Cthulhu Wars, I'll go ahead and mention the Cthulhu Wars number for those of you who've been watching or listening in November. Basically, Sandy and those guys sent me an extra copy of Cthulhu Wars. The board game. It's sealed, not opened, brand new Cthulhu Wars game, so I thought, well, I'll give it away to somebody. Randomly picking someone who watches or listens to the show in the month of November. And the way I can pick people is every show you write the prizes email address for the show with the number for that particular show. For example, this week's number is 451, 451. So what you would do is send an email to lovecraftezine.prizes@gmail.com. Put Cthulhu Wars in the subject and put 451 in the body of the email. So again, that's Lovecraft, EZINEPRIZES, lovecraftezine.prizes@gmail.com. So a couple of weeks from now, I'll use random.org to count up all those entries and pick somebody randomly. So in advance, someone is going to win it, and quite a few people are not. So do not blame me. Blame random.org. So anyway, and we'll give this away a little bit too. Any other news, Pete? No.
Nothing I want to talk about.
Well, I noticed that we have good ratings for this show. Whether it's downloads or live views or whatnot. But when you talk about something controversial, the ratings always go up, downloads go up. So if there was I wish there was something controversial I could talk about, but there's not. So we'll just go on to.
There is one.
I can't think of anything at any rate.
There is one.
I don't think there is. So.
Okay, but there is one I'm thinking of.
No, I don't.
I think we've done that one to death.
That's why I didn't say it, because I had a feeling this one had been covered at least 200 times.
He always says he doesn't know when I'm joking. And yes, I am joking. I don't want to talk about it. Unfortunately, the Punktown comic book adaptation that just finished a couple of days ago. Jeffrey Thomas's Punktown, and the Kickstarter did not happen, but they raised potentially a lot of money. I think like $22,000. So I know they're gonna start over. I don't know when, but I think the second time they'll make it go, and I'm looking forward to it. You mentioned Cthulhu Wars a minute ago, Rick. This is his second extremely successful Kickstarter. Sandy Peterson's. But a lot of people don't know that almost directly before the first one that was so successful, just a few months before, Sandy did a Kickstarter for something a little bit different. It was Lovecraftian. It wasn't Cthulhu Wars, and it failed. So, then he goes on to do Cthulhu Wars and raises hundreds of thousands, over $1 million for both of them, I believe. So my point is, just because Punktown comic book adaptation didn't make it this time, I'm sure it'll make it the next time. They're going to make some adjustments, and I will definitely be supporting it. I hope everybody else does too. So, one of the things about Punktown is that it's hard to define, and that's a great thing. That's one of the things that makes it so great, but it also makes it hard to promote. So, when you can't stick an easy label on something. So.
There is one thing which we could bring up, because Tina dealt with this in its fiction. It kind of ties in with what we were discussing before. What Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is sort of doing is they're taking an Inhuman, who's a early occupant of Earth, and turning him in. He evolves into something that approaches a Great Old One.
Yeah.
You have the theory, Pete, that the Great Old Ones were once, if not humans, alien beings who were not that super, and they it's sort of like 2001: A Space Odyssey. Instead of becoming that little fetus, you become Cthulhu.
Well, I think that little fetus is very Lovecraftian.
Yeah.
But yeah, I play with this whole idea of the singularity, with the concept that either individuals or entire species hit some point and then made the leap into godhood, becoming things like Cthulhu and the various other entities of the mythos. I don't like the idea that the mythos characters or the mythos monsters and the deities are just a stable pantheon. I think that the universe is big, and there's a lot of ways to get to be something like Cthulhu.
Yeah.
And I think, Rick, you're really referencing a story in A Mythos Grimly.
Yes.
In which is a very controversial story.
I didn't think it was controversial.
Why is it controversial? What are you talking about?
I So
Well, you can't say it without people that don't.
You know, as I said before, you don't have to. There are a lot of mythos stories which I think are very well done, but they're not part of the grand mythology that I am going to link up with.
yeah.
I'll probably accept yours, though. I like what you did.
Okay. Well, I've never. If you've been following my career, I've never actually brought Cthulhu onto screen before.
Yeah.
I've danced around him a lot, but in the story I'm in a mythos Grimly, which is called the Orthometrist of Boral. I bring him center stage, and maybe some people will hang me as a heretic.
Well, I will, and I haven't
think
even
you
read the
can go
story.
any direction with the mythos, and I think it's widespread enough that you can accept. You can say this was a great story, even though you may not accept all the. You may not want to make it part of your canon mythos in your mind.
Right. Right.
It's just like Joe Pulver has his King in Yellow canon.
Right. Which
But,
doesn't.
but if somebody writes a very good story in which Hastur is a great old one,
Yep. You'll
he's not
sneak
going
it
to
in.
say this is a lousy story.
Right.
Yeah.
So. But yeah,
It's
I
an
have
enjoyable
these
story. It
ideas.
just it doesn't fit into his concept of the King in Yellow.
Right. But yeah,
Um,
I had a lot of fun writing that story. So,
I forget, is a Mythos Grimly out?
yeah, it is.
Okay.
In fact, I have a copy. It would be nice if the title was on the cover.
Oh.
Go back. Take it back from the camera a little bit. Oh, I see. Okay.
That's what it's on the spine.
Hmm.
But I remember when I got this in the mail, I go, "What is this?" Oh, it's a Mythos Grimly.
I do like the artwork.
I have the hardcover. But I think
that's a
that
very nice looking book. Yeah.
yeah, it is. I think that they didn't put text on the cover because the cover is just so gorgeous
Yeah.
that it would be a shame to cover it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice book. I haven't had a chance to read it yet.
And I just got a little. There's been too much on television for me to watch. I've read your story and I read Joe's, which he wrote with Tom Lynch. But I haven't read like Bob Price's yet, and a lot of other people in there.
So what is this about you being on C-SPAN?
I lost you. What?
What is this about you being on C-SPAN?
Oh, you're breaking up on me, but I can hear the word C-SPAN. All right, so every year I go down to Miami Book Fair, and I've been doing it for a long time. I used to sell books for a living, and I used to do Miami Book Fair every year. I gave it up to write almost full time. But so we're down there today, and the place was pretty dead because it's pouring down rain the whole time. And they had the C-SPAN interview booth outside underneath a tent, and they were interviewing P.J. O'Rourke, and I photobombed them. And just waved to the family from C-SPAN too.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I saw you posted. The other funny story is you were trying to get an invite there for a while, and you got to go today because of your son.
Yeah, so I've been trying to get, as an author, into Miami Book Fair for about 5 years now, and they just keep saying no.
Not good enough.
Yeah. A couple months ago, my son made his first professional sale to the Orange Island Literary Review, and they did the release party at Miami Book Fair. So they comped his attendance and gave him a +1.
Nice.
So I went as a
That's funny.
guest of my son. Like, son of a...
What's the story about?
I can't tell you that. No,
okay.
it's about a guy who he has a very boring day.
It
And
has a
then,
beginning, a middle, and an end, right?
yes. Well, no, he just gets up in the morning, he chooses what suit he's going to wear, he goes about his day, and the guy at the coffee shop says, you know, that suit's coming back into style. I've seen a couple people wear it. And then he goes to lunch, and somebody makes a comment that, you know, that's coming back into style, and he goes and does a reading, and that his poetry is coming back into style, and he sits down and he feeds the birds, and the birds treat him like he's a regular, and people comment on that. And then when he goes back home, he opens up the hidden panel in his bedroom and goes into the meat locker and takes off the suit of the person he's been wearing all day and hangs it up and decides who he's going to wear tomorrow.
How old's your son again?
16.
That's great. You gotta
Yeah.
be pretty proud of him.
And I was surprised because they put it as the first piece in the book. So, which is usually the piece that you try and grab people to read the rest of the book with.
What is this anthology called again?
It's called the Orange Island Literary Review,
Mm-hmm.
and it's their second issue. And it's somewhere between professional and high school, but hey, whatever.
We'll call it small press, right?
We'll call it small press. That's right.
You know, we all write for Tales of the Shadowmen.
Yeah.
And so even though you missed this entry, and I'm gonna ask Frank about his story in there in a minute. But I was saying when John Mark edits that, he always puts everybody in alphabetical order.
I know.
And I would like to see some people moved around once. I would like to think of, you know, this is what he thought was the best lead-in story. This was the best.
Yeah,
end story.
there's an art to that.
Yeah, there is.
Because it does become a problem. Because, you know, sometimes those of us who write for this are going to submit stories for the same volume that have some similarity. And
Especially that year we all did Black Coats.
but that was because John Mark said do Black Coat's Treasure.
Yeah, that's true.
Remember, I got into a debate because somebody said I'm going to use Fu Manchu, and I said I got a story already coming up where that sort of happens.
Yeah.
Even though it wasn't published somewhere else. I mean, it was published somewhere else. I said you can do that, but just let you know. You know, you can get into this debate. Oh, well, before I do that, Frank, what is your story going to be this year in Tales of the Shadowmen?
This year's story, I do another Gene Caravan story. He does kind of an Indiana Jones character from France who looks like Clark Gable, I believe. He dealt with ancient astronauts, a war between these two ancient astronaut bodies fighting it out on Earth, and I've written 4 or 5 of them. This year, I sort of went a little nuts on it and went back to having the usual war between these two bodies, the good Polarians and the evil Danubians, in a sense, but I threw in some references and some appearances by Doctor Who characters from the original Doctor Who days. The Santarans have a direct part of this story, and it's a lot of fun. It was a fun, quick little story I threw in there. I never got to write a Doctor Who character before, so I guess I got something out of it this time.
What I was going to say was crossovers.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have people repeat the same idea, and even if they may not be first, maybe they'll be better.
Hmm.
I've seen S.T. Dusher just came out with Madness of Cthulhu 2, and the first story in there is Captain Nemo. It's a story by Kevin Anderson that Captain Nemo discovers Reye, I guess. I haven't read it yet. I just know it has Captain Nemo in it.
Right. That was done as 40,000
there were two other stories,
Yeah.
which had Captain Nemo involved was the mythos.
Yep.
Yeah, I can see that. That's an easy. That's an easy one. Yeah.
They're different. I've done Phantom of the Opera with different Phantom of the Operas in Persian novels. I'm reading one now that our friend Salome Jens. Did I say her last name right?
Jones.
Jones. Yeah, there's an actress named with Jens.
Yeah.
Salome Jones. Published.
Speaking of crossovers, have you guys yet read that Shadow story? Shadow is over Innsmouth, or is that the title? It's basically the Shadow in Innsmouth.
Yeah. No.
Recent
I
comic.
read it. I was not happy.
Oh, weren't you? Okay, not good.
It's basically. I'm going to give away the whole plot. The Shadow.
Yeah, it's not good. So yeah, don't buy it.
Well, or let me put it this way: it's not the Shadow meets the interacts in the Lovecraft universe.
Oh, it's not. Okay.
It's something. It's sort of like Peter Cannon's Lovecraft novels, if you've ever read them. Something happens that Lovecraft later hears about and bases his story on.
Is the idea bad? The execution? Both?
Yeah, I'll put it. You'll probably guess what it's going to be if I say this, but I'll just give a vague idea. It's like a Scooby-Doo story.
Okay.
Classic Scooby-Doo.
Yeah.
All right. Well, no thanks. I just saved some money.
Yeah.
You can do. I read. I'm not going to say what the novel was because it would ruin it. But I read one novel which was like that, but it didn't rule out that Lovecraft's guys didn't exist.
Right.
But that you can write. There have been weird menace mythos stories where it's you're all ready to go to Lovecraft and it's somebody pretending to be creating an elaborate hoax.
Right.
Yeah.
Henry Kuttner's Skulls Have No Ears.
But that was kind of a Janus resolution in the moment because there was a possibility that Dagon really existed.
Right.
But those can work because if the mythos existed, there would be fake Cthulhu cultists,
right,
or con artists or whatever.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But if you make it, if you rule out that Lovecraft stuff could happen in the same universe, then you're not going to like it.
All right. So next Sunday, okay, I'm driving to Iowa with my wife and son and her sister and brother-in-law, and we're doing this whole family thing.
You taking a gun?
Sorry?
You taking a gun?
To Iowa? No, you need a gun in Texas, not Iowa.
Oh, I'm sorry. Children of the Corn, man.
You need some snow tires, I hear, since it snowed like crazy in the Midwest the last couple of days. But anyway, I believe that I'm going to be back sometime Saturday night. So obviously we don't have a guest scheduled. We may or may not do a show depending on how wiped out I am. And I know that Rick at least said that he'd be around. So we can do one of those shows where we sit around and talk nonsense, which one could argue is every show anyway. The long and the short of it is, I don't know if we're doing a show next week or not, but I will definitely post no later than Saturday and let the audience know, let you guys know. If you want this awesome Cthulhu coin from the ladies at the Littlest Lovecraft, send me a email, again, to lovecraftezine@gmail.com, and please put Cthulhu coin in the there we go, in the subject of the email. Put whatever you want in the body of the email, and I will pick someone randomly sometime in the next few days. So yeah,
Mike, is it okay to give away those horrified press books?
Absolutely.
I
You know
mentioned?
what, Jason? I completely forgot about them. Yeah, let's do some more giveaways then. Remind me what they are. Tell the audience, yeah.
Okay, we're going to give away 5 copies, and the audience members can take their pick from one of the following 4. The Fall of Cthulhu,
Okay.
The Fall of Cthulhu Volume 2,
All right.
Swords Against Cthulhu, and Barbarian Crowns.
Okay. And
Can I answer?
5 winners. Let me ask real quick. 5 winners, you said?
Yes, and that's from Horrified Press, and
Yes, you can interview.
Nathan Rowork donated them, so thanks, Nathan, for that.
So basically, 5 people will have 5 winners, and they can pick whichever book they want. But you don't have 5 of each, is what I'm trying to understand, or do you?
Correct. Yeah, just 1 copy apiece. They could pick whatever one they want. At it.
All right,
Five winners pick one. Yep.
So again, Lovecraft eZine prizes at gmail.com, and put the title of the book that you would like to win. Now, what I'll do, since we have these extra prizes, is I'll divide all these up between people who are watching live and the people who watch later on in the week, let's say for the next 6 days or so. And we'll use, again, random.org to pick the winners, and I'll send the winners' postal addresses to Jason. So thanks for that, Jason. That's great.
We're not done with it. I'm going to give away 1 copy of Quest of Frankenstein.
Okay. We'll do that too.
Add that to the list. It's up there for anybody who wants it. Do a little drawing, same thing.
What I will do when I get the podcast version done and archive the video version on YouTube is I'll list all these books for people listening and watching later in the week. So more incentive to watch or listen after I do that. So thanks, guys. Appreciate that. And sorry I forgot before, Jason. We talked about it, and then I forgot to mention it.
Oh, no problem.
And you wonder why we always forget whether you're joking or not.
Yeah. Yeah. It's because I have such an expressive face. All right. We have anything else to talk about? Or are we done? Thanks for being on the show, Jason and Frank. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Really, it's a pleasure.
Yeah, glad to have you guys here. And again, not sure if we'll see everybody next week, but definitely in 2 weeks. Before we finish here, let me list the guest. Oh yeah, Andrea Doyon from The Black Watchman, which is that reality, alternate reality game with some. It's got some Lovecraftian elements, but alternate reality games, I'm not going to get into it right now, are extremely fascinating. I'm really looking forward to talking to this guy. That's the 6th of December. 13th, Wayne June. I think every Lovecraft fan probably knows who he is. Reads a lot of Lovecraftian stories. And then getting into January, got Paul Tremblay, author of A Head Full of Ghosts. Robert Levy, author of The Glittering World. So, should be fun. So anyway, thanks guys, and we'll see everybody either next week or the weekend.
Thank you.